Hi, this is Don from Ridge Engineering. In this tutorial, I'm going to give you an introduction to the latest version of PC Warrants. This tutorial is primarily for people that haven't seen PC Warrants or is just getting started with it. But if you're an existing user of PC Warrants but haven't updated to the latest version, then this tutorial may be helpful to you as well, because one or two of the screens have changed a little bit, and I'll be showing you how those new screens work. So I'm not going to show you how to install the software. I'm going to assume that you or your IT people have successfully installed the software and can get it to run. And when you get it to run, the first thing you see is the startup options screen. Now, the first time you run the software, you're going to want to set the preferences, and you do that by clicking on the gray button. And that brings up the PC Warrants preferences screen. And there are several tabs across the top of the screen, and they lead to different screens that you fill in. Now, the first decision that you need to make is, do you want to use the 2000-2003 MUTCD version, or do you want to use the newer 2009 MUTCD version? There are some changes in the warrants from the two versions, but you can switch back and forth if you need to, just by changing this setting. Now, we know a lot of people will start with the 2000-2003 edition and use that until their area, their city, their state, whatever, has formally adopted the 2009 MUTCD, in which case all you need to do is go into this screen, change this setting, and nothing else needs to be changed. The software handles everything else. Your previous studies that you've done will all be updated the next time you run them, if you need to rerun them. And so you can go back and forth if you need to. If you haven't seen the 2009 MUTCD and you want to just play with it, you can just go into that mode, try it out, see the differences, and then go back when you actually do a real study. Now, you also will go to the Report tab, and typically you would put in the name of your organization, and this is printed at the top of every report. It's like letterhead for your stationery, and you can put in 3 headings: the city of whatever, Public Works Department, and maybe a phone number or a URL to a website. And then you can also embed a logo in an image file at the top of the report. I'm not going to go into the details of how you do this in this tutorial. There will be a series of small tutorials, and one of them will be just on this topic. How do you embed a logo in your reports? You also will go to the Paths tab and set where you want to store your signal warrant and your multi-way stop warrant studies. The software evaluates both signal warrants and multi-way stop warrants based on the MUTCD, and most people will want to store those studies in different folders to keep them separate. A lot of people will store their signal warrant studies on a network drive, so you or your IT people would go into this screen, set the path to your network drive, and generally once you've done it once, you don't do it again. PC Warrants also allows you to import data from PetroPro, which is a JMAR program for doing turning movement counts, or other software using road tube counters, or however you've collected your volume data. So you would set these paths, and when you import the data, the software would start in those folders, and then you can go find the exact file that you want to import. There's also signal warrant options that you can select, and you can enable or disable different warrants depending on the particular study that you're using. A new change to the software is the ability to make these changes at a different place in the software on the site data screen. So the settings on this screen aren't quite as important as they used to be. So we'll leave them alone for now. There are the default values that are embedded in the software that are part of the MUTCD. Typically you would never change any of these numbers, but maybe in a couple of years your state or the feds will change something, and instead of having to get an all new update to the software, you can just go in, make whatever change they made, and you're off and running. As I said before, the software also supports multi-way stop sign warrants, and there are a couple of options that you can select for those. And typically you would not change those once you've made the decisions. And again, I'm not going to go through the details of this now. There will be a mini tutorial just on multi-way stops that'll explain the various options on the screen and what they mean. So once you have everything set up on the preferences, you click OK, and that brings you back to the startup options screen. And this is where you normally would start most of your sessions because you've already defined the preferences. So we're going to start a new signal warrant study, and I'll click on this button. And that brings us to the main screen. The main screen has the drop-down menus at the top of the screen to select various options. It also has the toolbar for selecting the more common options. And this area shows the current status of the study. It shows the warrants, and with the 2009 warrants, there are 9 different warrants. Now, this tutorial is not going to explain how the warrants work. This tutorial is just to explain how the software evaluates the warrants. I'm assuming that you have some familiarity with the warrants and how they all work. Also, on the screen, you can see the status of the volume data and the site data. And one of the things that you do is you import or you enter the volume data in some way, and you enter the site data. Now first we're going to start with the volume data. So I'm going to click on the button. This brings up the volume data matrix, as we call it, for this data, and it's all zeros because we haven't done anything yet. And what I want to do is I want to import a Petropro file. So to do that, I run the volume data wizard. I select Petropro, and again, I'm not going to go through the details of this screen here. Other tutorials will go through this in detail. And I select the Petropro file that I want to use, and I've already pre-selected this. And it brings up a screen that shows the turning movements read from that Petropro file. You can see that it has the names of the streets and the directions that they're going in. And there's other settings that you may or may not use. And again, there will be another tutorial to explain these in detail. But everything is fine. I'm going to hit the transfer button, and that brings the data to the volume data screen. And in order to see the numbers, I can compress the volume data matrix by using these checkboxes at the bottom. So now I'm seeing the hourly totals of the data for each approach. And you can see that there's data in all 4 approaches from 6 to 6 o'clock at night. And there's also pedestrian data for those time periods. So we have both volume data, cars and trucks, and pedestrians. And the OK button is green. And one of the rules of PC Warrants is you make the OK button green on the volume data screen and on the site data screen. And so we have enough information on this screen to evaluate the volume part of the warrants. And in general, you need at least 8 hours of volume data for at least 3 approaches. You can have a T intersection, and that's fine. But if you only have 2 approaches, that's not enough to evaluate a warrant. And if you've enabled the pedestrian warrant and you have 0 pedestrians, it will also tell you that there's a little problem. So we wait till we're OK. And now we click OK. And we go back to the main screen, and now it updates and it says, okay, now the volume data is in good shape. So now we're going to set the site data. I'm going to click on the button, and that brings up the site data screen. Now, if you've used PC Warrants before, you'll recognize a new section, which is the part of the preferences screen for the signal warrants that's been duplicated on this screen. And this is going to be a very handy way of making sure that you have all the information that you want and need for your warrants. Now, the software constantly looks at what you've entered and what it needs, and at the moment it's not happy. The OK light is light red, and so I can click on the what's missing button to see what's missing, and it says, okay, the approach speeds are missing or incomplete, and I say, okay, that's true, I didn't do anything. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to say that the 85th percentile speeds for the main street is not greater than 40. I can set it to 40 or less than 40. I can set it for either one. It sets it for both. So now all the information that the software needs is available right now. Now I can look at my signal warrants and see what I have enabled. At the moment, I have the school crossing disabled because this is not a school crossing area. But if I wanted to enable that, then I would have to enter some information about the start time and the stop time that the children use the school crossing. This isn't a school crossing. I'm not going to worry about that. I could turn on the coordinated signal system if this were part of a coordinated signal system. It's not. If I have crash data, I can enable the crash data. If I enable that, it wants me to put in a number. Even 0 is okay. If I know that the number is 0, then I can put that in. At the moment, it's indeterminate, so it's not happy. I don't have any crash data. I'm not going to worry about that for this one. And same thing for the roadway network. If I want to enable that, then I can say that, yes, this is or is not a major route. This is not used very often, but it might be important. And the new warrant, warrant 9, is an intersection near a grade crossing. And if I enable that, I have to select one of the minor approaches to say this is the side that the railroad crossing is on. When I do that, the RR symbol turns yellow and it says that it's happy now. This isn't part of an intersection near a grade crossing, so I'm going to disable that. So now I've gone through, I've said, yes, I have all the information that I need. I've enabled the pedestrian warrant because I have pedestrian data, and that's likely to be an important part of this warrant analysis. And everything looks good, so I'm going to click on OK. Now when I click on OK, the site data is happy, the volume data is happy, so the software has now evaluated the warrants, and the results are shown in the warrant status. And you can see that only the peak hour delay warrant is met with this particular set of data. Now let's just pick one of these to see why it's not met. So if I click on a button, this is the minimum volume screen, and I need 600 vehicles in the major and at the same time 200 vehicles on the minor for any given hour. And this grid at the bottom shows the total of the main street versus the larger of the minor, which is the way the warrant is worded. And you can see that I have 1 hour that meets those two requirements, but that's all. And in this case, here's an hour where the volumes meet the major, but the minor, I don't have enough volumes on the minor, and that's why this warrant is not going to be met. Now, if I realize that I made a mistake on the site data, I can change it here. Say I realize that the 85th percentile really is greater than 40 miles an hour. Then I can change that. It changes the values. It reevaluates the warrants. And now I have 5 hours that meet the warrant, but I need 8. So it's better or closer, not necessarily better, but closer, but still not quite right. And you can do that with the other warrants and see why they aren't met. Now the peak hour delay is met. Let's take a quick look at that. And what this does is it looks at each possible hour on 15-minute boundaries, and there's 95 of them. So it calculates the total of all approaches for every possible hour, and then it finds the higher minor approach for that particular hour, and it says, okay, is the major greater than 800 and the minor greater than 150? Yes, but there's a lot of hours that meet that. But the delay was disabled in the preferences because I don't have delay data for this intersection. So I'm curious to see whether or not the warrant is met with just the volume data, and it is. And if you remember, no other warrant is met. None of the other volume warrants are met. So now I'm in kind of a situation where I have to decide, do I want to go out and do a delay study in order to find out if this warrant really is met or not? And I can look at this data, and if I click on the top of a column, it resorts the data by that criteria. So if I want to just look at all the minor approaches, I can click on that and I can see I've got 267 vehicles trying to make a turn against a total of 1360. And those are well above the minimums, but not crazy above. And a little bit of experience or practice with this, you can decide whether or not you need to go out and do a delay study. Because if the volumes are very, very high, then it's almost a certainty that there's going to be a lot of delay on this minor approach as these cars queue up trying to make turns, either rights or lefts, or throughs. And so the closer this is to the minor criteria, the better the argument might be that you might really need a delay study to see whether or not you do have enough delay, because there's a very good chance that you don't have enough delay, and if the delay is not met, then the warrant won't be met, even though the volume part of it is met. It's much harder for the delay to be met than the volumes in most cases. So this is a good example of data where you don't have to do a delay study initially, but if you happen to be in this spot where no other warrants are met except for the delay warrant, and the delay warrant is not overwhelmingly met, then you might need to go out and do a delay study if you really want to do this properly. The pedestrian volume we also enabled. You can go in and look and see why it's not met, and it has some curves where it plots the total pedestrians versus the volume of cars. And in general, you need a lot of pedestrians in order for this warrant to be met. And you can see that we're nowhere near meeting those warrants. So, but that's how the new pedestrian warrant works. All right, so you can go through and look if you want to and see why the various warrants aren't met and make sure that in your own mind that you've done it correctly. But at some point you're going to say, okay, that's fine. I want to save this study. And you're going to hit the save button, and then you're going to put in I'll call this just test 1 for no particular reason. And I'll save that. And it'll save it in the folder where you've been saving your studies. And then typically you would go up and print this report. And you have two choices. You can print a 1-page summary or a 2-page summary. The 2-page summary is the 1-page summary plus an additional page of information on the first 3 volume warrants. So let's select 2. And because I'm doing this tutorial in an odd way, the screen just looked kind of odd. And so I'm going to make it so that it fills the screen that you're looking at a little bit better. Normally it would just fill the screen, and it's a preview and you can take a look at it. And if you're happy with it, you can print it to a printer, which you can select, or you can print it to a PDF file. And this is the first page, and it shows some site information, and then the warrant are listed and whether or not they're satisfied or not. And you can see that the only one that is satisfied is the peak hour. And it says the delay data was not evaluated. So it'll give you a hint, all right, why this was met. And then you can go to the second page, and it has the curves that are used in the first 3 warrants, and an analysis of the 8-hour volume warrants and shows you the various hours that are met. And then when you're done, you close that and you're done. So that's a quick introduction to PC Warrants. So we've started with setting up the preferences. Then we went and imported a PetraPro turning movement count file, entered the site data, and then which then evaluated the warrants and checked a couple of the warrants, and then printed the report. So go check the other tutorials. We'll be adding more, and they'll go into more detail on the various parts that I glossed over on this particular tutorial. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.